dangerous, lethal, deadly. What do these words have in common? They all describe things that can cause harm or destruction. In this episode, we'll explore words related to killers, from crime to metaphorical meanings. With definitions, examples, and images, let's uncover this dark vocabulary. Assassin as noun. A person who murders a person, usually for political or ideological reasons. Someone who carries out a planned killing, often as part of a conspiracy or covert operation. The notorious assassin was known for using various disguises to evade capture. The assassination of the president shocked the nation and sparked widespread unrest. The government employed assassins to eliminate political opponents. The assassin waited in the shadows for his target to emerge from the building. Historically, assassins have played significant roles in shaping the course of events through targeted killings. Murderer as noun. A criminal who has been convicted of committing murder and sentenced accordingly. A person who commits murder. One who unlawfully kills another person with premeditation or malice. The community was gripped with fear as the identity of the murderer remained unknown. She was horrified to discover that her own brother was the murderer of their parents. The murderer was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal killing of his neighbor. The murderer confessed to the crime during interrogation by the police. The detective worked tirelessly to apprehend the elusive murderer responsible for the string of homicides. Slaughterer as noun. A person or thing that causes great destruction or loss of life. One who kills animals for food. A person employed in the killing of animals, especially for butchering or processing meat. In some cultures, the role of slaughterer is reserved for individuals with specific religious or ritualistic training. The serial killer was dubbed the silent slaughterer by the media for his methodical approach to his crimes. The Industrial Revolution brought about the rise of mechanical slaughterers, improving efficiency in meat processing. The history books referred to him as the slaughterer of innocents for his brutal tactics in warfare. The slaughterer worked at the abattoir, processing livestock for distribution to meat markets. Butcher as verb. To kill someone brutally or indiscriminately. To slaughter and prepare an animal for food. The gangsters butchered their rivals in a violent turf war. He butchered the deer he hunted, using every part of the animal for food. The farmer butchered the pig to provide meat for the winter. The chef butchered the chicken with skillful precision, separating the meat from the bones. The invading army butchered civilians indiscriminately, leaving devastation in their wake. Criminal as adjective. Involving or guilty of illegal activity or wrongdoing. Of, relating to or involving crimes or the commission of crimes. The company implemented strict security measures to prevent criminal activity within its premises. It is illegal to provide assistance to a known criminal who is evading capture. The suspect had a long history of criminal behavior, including theft and assault. The police conducted a criminal investigation into the robbery, interviewing witnesses and collecting evidence. The criminal justice system is responsible for investigating and prosecuting unlawful activities. Felon as adjective. Having the qualities or attributes associated with criminal behavior, morally reprehensible or unlawful. Relating to or characteristic of a person who has committed a felony, a serious crime typically punishable by imprisonment for more than 1 year. The company conducted background checks to ensure they did not hire any individuals with a felon record. The felon suspect was apprehended by the police after a lengthy pursuit. He was convicted of felon possession of a firearm and sentenced to 5 years in prison. The organization works to provide rehabilitation and support services for felons reintegrating into society. Felon activity in the neighborhood has residents concerned about their safety. Killer as noun. A destructive or lethal force or factor. A person or thing that kills, especially a murderer. Environmental activists warned of the dangers posed by industrial pollutants, labeling them silent killers of ecosystems. The sniper was known as a silent killer, striking from hidden vantage points with deadly accuracy. The virus proved to be a silent killer, claiming thousands of lives before a vaccine was developed. The documentary explored the psyche of a contract killer hired to eliminate political rivals. The police apprehended the serial killer responsible for a string of murders in the city. Butcher as noun. Informal, derogatory. Used to describe someone who has killed people in a brutal or indiscriminate way. A person whose trade is cutting up and selling meat in a shop. The butcher behind the counter was busy preparing cuts of meat for the customers. She bought a pound of ground beef from the local butcher for dinner. The notorious serial killer was dubbed the Butcher by the media for his gruesome crimes. He was labeled a butcher by his opponents for his ruthless tactics on the battlefield. The butcher displayed a variety of sausages and cuts of steak in the meat case. Criminal as noun. Informal. A person who engages in morally objectionable behavior. A person who has committed a crime, an offender or lawbreaker. The criminal was apprehended by law enforcement officers and taken into custody. Despite his past as a criminal, he managed to turn his life around and become a productive member of society. Organized crime syndicates often recruit young individuals to become part of their criminal enterprises. The local community rallied together to address the issue of rising crime rates and to rehabilitate former criminals. The court imposed a harsh sentence on the repeat criminal, including several years in prison. Bloodletter as noun. A term sometimes used metaphorically to describe someone or something that causes harm or suffering. Historically, a person who practiced bloodletting, a medical treatment involving the withdrawal of blood from a patient. The book depicts the bloodletter as a sinister character who preys on the weaknesses of others. The ancient physician was known as a skilled bloodletter, despite the practice falling out of favor in modern medicine. Some view the corporation as a bloodletter, profiting off the suffering of others. The villain in the story is portrayed as a bloodletter, causing chaos and destruction wherever he goes. In medieval times, bloodletters were believed to balance the body's humors by removing excess blood. Homicide as verb. The act of killing another human being, whether intentionally, unintentionally, or with legal justification. The unlawful killing of another person, often considered a criminal offense under the law. The defendant pleaded guilty to manslaughter, a lesser charge than homicide, and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The forensic investigation concluded that the cause of death was homicide, ruling out the possibility of suicide or accidental death. The prosecutor argued that the evidence clearly pointed to premeditated homicide and called for the maximum penalty under the law. Homicide rates have been steadily declining in the region thanks to increased law enforcement efforts and community outreach programs. The suspect was charged with homicide after allegedly shooting the victim during a botched robbery attempt. Culprit as noun. A person who is responsible for a crime or other wrongdoing, the perpetrator of an offense, something or someone responsible for causing a particular problem or difficulty. The faulty wiring was identified as the culprit behind the house fire. The police apprehended the culprit behind the burglary after a thorough investigation. After a series of car break-ins, the neighborhood watch launched an initiative to catch the culprits. The main culprit for the project's failure was identified as poor communication among team members. In the courtroom, the judge asked the witness to identify the culprit among the suspects. Manslaughter as noun. The crime of killing a person without intending to do so, but with recklessness or criminal negligence. The unlawful killing of a person without malice aforethought, either voluntarily upon a sudden impulse or unintentionally as a result of recklessness. The jury deliberated whether the act constituted murder or manslaughter. The defendant claimed that the death was accidental, but the prosecution argued it was a case of manslaughter due to negligence. The defendant was charged with manslaughter after causing a fatal car accident while driving under the influence. In some cases, manslaughter may be considered a lesser offense compared to murder. He was convicted of involuntary manslaughter for causing the death of his friend during a reckless stunt. Perpetrator as noun. A person who commits or perpetrates a criminal or wrongful act. The individual who carries out an offense or wrongdoing. The individual or entity responsible for causing harm, injury, or damage. The party that initiates or carries out a harmful action or deed. The organization launched an investigation to uncover the perpetrators of the fraudulent scheme. The perpetrator of the vandalism was apprehended and charged with destruction of property. The police identified the perpetrator of the burglary through DNA evidence found at the scene. The perpetrator of the cyber attack remains unknown, despite efforts to trace the source of the breach. She bravely testified against her perpetrator in court, seeking justice for the assault she endured. Slayer as noun. A person or thing that is particularly successful at causing death or destruction. One who kills another person or creature, especially in a violent or deliberate manner. The mythical hero was known as the Dragon Slayer for his bravery in battling and defeating the fearsome beasts. The assassin was hired as a political slayer, targeting key figures to destabilize the government. The vampire slayer was tasked with hunting and destroying undead creatures that preyed on the living. The werewolf was depicted as a relentless slayer of innocent villagers in the folklore of many cultures. The disease spread rapidly, earning the virus the moniker the Silent Slayer for its stealthy and deadly nature. Executioner as noun. A person whose job or duty is to carry out executions, typically as a means of administering capital punishment or enforcing the law. Figuratively, a person or entity responsible for carrying out a particular task or action, often with a sense of finality or authority. The executioner of the corporate world, the CEO, made the final decision to lay off hundreds of employees. In medieval times, the executioner was responsible for carrying out public executions, often by methods such as beheading or hanging. The executioner's role in society has evolved over time, with the abolishment of many forms of capital punishment in modern legal systems. As the executioner of justice, the judge handed down the sentence to the convicted criminal. In literature, the Grim Reaper is often depicted as a symbolic executioner, representing the inevitability of death. Level up your English. Master vocabulary, idioms, and phrasal verbs with fun quizzes. Translate meanings into 104 languages. Download now. Link in the description. Please like and subscribe to our channel.